The journey from Invercargill to Stewart Island, New Zealand's southernmost island, started with the roughest sea ferry any of us had ever taken.
We've just arrived in Halfmoon Bay after the most nauseous journey you could possibly think of. 3 out of 5 of us completely threw up on the boat ride. It is actually the biggest tui I've ever seen.
The journey began with a walk along the coast road, passing countless tuis, fantails, and other native birds singing in the trees. After a couple of hours, we reached the start of the Rakiura Track, a 3-day journey known as one of New Zealand's great walks. This was our first complete Great Walk of New Zealand, and the southernmost point any of us had ever been on Earth. The track started with some historical boards outlining the Maori history of the island, the first European settlements and industries on the island, and some information about the native flora and fauna, a lot of which numbers have dwindled on the mainland of New Zealand due to introduced predators and pests. The trail was stunning right from the start, thick damp forests lining a rugged coastline, and sheltered by giant tree ferns. After our descent down from the forest, we made our way to Maori Beach for a quick snack stop.
We've just taken a small break at Maori Beach, about 2/3 of the way to our site for the night. Snake? I don't know.
After traversing the beach, we climbed our way up a large forested hill. This would be our final trek for the day, before descending down to our hut for the night, known as Port William. After arriving at our hut and settling in, we were welcomed by a small deer who seemed to have no fear of humans. Unfortunately, deer are not native to New Zealand and are considered pests. Luckily for this deer, there were no hunters among us. After dinner, we went out kiwi spotting. While trying to play a prank on the girls, Yika and I rustled around some leaves in the dark while I filmed. While recording, an actual kiwi entered the video. We were ecstatic. We ran back to the hut to tell the girls. We explored a different part of the bush where we saw another kiwi. Whilst trying to lure it by rustling a branch, it lunged towards me and landed on my leg. The mud at the start of the trail was an indication of what was to come on our longest hike day of the trip. Our first point of interest were some old train engines that were abandoned in the early 1900s, which were used to transport logs down to the bay to be shipped off the island. Much of the island's original native trees were cleared during this time. Giants like the native rimu were heavily logged, which changed the diversity of the environment. Before not too long, the mud returned. It was deep in some sections and hard to navigate in others. Through the forest, we climbed a big hill steadily and enjoyed a campfire lunch at the top. Dedicating my time to filming, I lingered behind the rest of the group. The solitude gave me a real sense of peace that can only be found in nature.
Holy fuck!
With that over, we began our descent, passing through changing forests of tree ferns to paperbark, over streams, and of course, more mud. We made our way to the hut for the night, known as the North Arm Hut.
Duck your head.
After arriving at the hut, we left our bags behind to explore the beautiful bay facing the tranquil Paterson Inlet. The bay was completely calm, except the sounds of the oyster-catcher seabirds quarrelling in the distance. After dinner and our nightly card games, we decided to go kiwi spotting again. Before we even put on our boots, we had a kiwi right in front of the hut. It was to be our only find of the night. The calm bays of the Paterson Inlet, with their still reflections, polarised the rough seas we encountered on our first day. The tracks were wet and muddy, but at least the sun was out. The coastal scenery was a big contrast to the sheltered forests the day before. Every bay opened up a completely different view. We felt as though we could spend a whole day in each spot, just basking in the sun after a long winter. This alone was reason enough to celebrate. Came across a beautiful little spot called Kaipipi Bay, where we set up for lunch and some rounds of cards under the blue sky. On the final leg of the trail, we decided to take the alternative route along the coast. That added an additional hour, but was well worth the journey. We took our time exploring the coastline and viewing the nearby islands, such as Oban Island, where we would be heading the following day. As we approached closer to the end of our trip, signs of civilization started to reappear, as we said our final goodbyes to the wilderness of the Rakiura Track.
It's a flounder.